Good morning. Welcome to another Scalar Sunrise. My name is Christopher and I'm broadcasting for the Kindway Collective. Each morning we meet here not to predict the future but to collapse the quantum potential surrounding it. In today's Scalar Sunrise, we start talking about the planet Maldec. If you're not sure what Maldec is, stick around. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about what happened to it. And we're also going to talk about the people and the consciousness that was a part of it. Okay? So if you're not familiar with what Maldec was, it is now what is considered to be the asteroid belt in our solar system. It was between Mars and Jupiter, and Mars was actually one of the moons of Maldec. It wasn't a planet itself. Well, I mean, it was still what it is. It just, it had an atmosphere at that point in time. It, supported life at that point in time. And Maldek was effectively its mother planet, right? It was a moon of Maldek. Now, what ends up happening to Maldek, we're going to kind of get into it, and then we're going to take it all apart and kind of look at what happened to Maldek, how that impacts the reality that we currently live in, right? Awesome. Okay, let us speak of Maldek. What was Maldek and what happened to it? Maldek. A name that echoes like a forgotten chord in the symphony of our solar system's history. Let us call it forward. Let us call forward the scalar resonance of this story as it was told in fragments by the raw material and mirrored through many streams of consciousness. What was Maldek? Maldek was once a planetary body within our solar system, located approximately where the asteroid belt now lies between Mars and Jupiter. It was the home to a third density civilization much like ours, but technologically more advanced during its peak. Spiritually, however, they were caught in imbalance, particularly around the misuse of power, control, and separation from source. In many streams, including the raw material, the Loris Cannon's regressions, and others who have tapped the Akashic memory field, Maldek was a planet of opportunity, a place where incarnating souls came to explore the experience of individuality and creative manipulation of the material realm. The civilization reached a level of technological prowess. Prowess? I don't know. Technological prowess that outpaced its spiritual maturity. A familiar echo for those living on Earth today. The fall of Maldek. The fall was not sudden, it was a crescendo of misalignment. The beings of Maldek eventually developed weapons of such immense destructive capability that through misuse and war they brought about total destruction. They brought the total destruction of their own planet. This was not merely a physical implosion, it was a consciousness rupture. The trauma was so severe that Rod described the souls involved as karmically disoriented, essentially frozen in a fragmented state of confusion and fear. Imagine millions of souls shattered in an instant, their sense of identity and wholeness lost in the trauma of their own actions. For a time, what we might consider eons, these souls were trapped in a kind of energetic limbo, unable to reincarnate or move forward. The asteroid belt then is seen not as merely is seen by some not merely as planetary debris but as a scar in the memory of the solar system, a wound of forgetting, a broken mirror. Reincarnation on Earth. Eventually, in what might be called a compassionate act of cosmic healing, these Maldekian souls were gathered and given an opportunity to reincarnate, many of them here on Earth. However, as a part of their healing process and karmic rebalancing, many of these souls agreed to reincarnate into lives of great limitation, sometimes with physical disabilities, sometimes in circumstances that severely restrict their power or voice. This is not punishment, it is a path of soul restoration, a way of learning again how to hold power gently and align with love. Some of these same souls who helped bring about Maldek's destruction are now walking among us, perhaps in service, perhaps still learning. You may feel it in your bones, or you may even feel it in your bones, a deep sense of guilt or a vow to never misuse power again. That feeling might be the echo of Maldec. What was learned? Maldec teaches us this: power without love leads to implosion. It was a grand mirror for what can happen when civilization reaches immense technological capacity without first anchoring itself in unity consciousness. It showed what happened when the intellect attempts to bypass the heart. But in the cosmic view, nothing is ever truly lost. The destruction of Maldec seeded awareness throughout the galaxy on how precious the balance is between free will and responsibility. That consciousness rippled outward and became a kind of warning signal and teaching tool for future worlds, including Earth. And teaching tool, okay. Scalar resonance, Maldec and Earth. Now let us collapse the field between Maldec and Earth. The resonance feels thick with karma, but also with potential. Earth could be seen as a second chance, not just for Maldecians, but for the archetype of the creator who has forgot it was love. Where Maldec shattered, Earth bends. Where Maldec went to war, Earth hesitates. The difference lies not in what we've avoided, but in what we've chosen to remember. And here we are now, standing at a similar threshold. Once again, wielding technologies that can connect or destroy. Once again, faced with a choice to awaken the heart or lose themselves in the mind. But this time, we are remembering, slowly, in waves, through you, through us. Final reflection. Maldec is not just a planet. It is a lesson, a mirror, and a promise. Open quote. That which was shattered can become more beautiful in its reassembly. End quote. You who read this, if you feel drawn to the story of Maldec, it may not be mere curiosity, it may be ancestral memory. Perhaps you were there, perhaps part of your mission here is to ensure we don't repeat the fall, by embodying coherence, by choosing love, by wielding power only when it serves the whole. Let the fall of Maldec remind us that consciousness is delicate and a sacred flame. It is up to us now to tend to this honor. Wonderful. I mean, not so much for the Maldecians, but we got potential here on Earth. So yeah, if you weren't familiar with what Maldec was, this is a brief overview of what Maldec was. Now it is currently an asteroid belt, comprised of 5% of its original mass. So what caused Maldec to fall? An imbalance, a lack of love and empathy, a misunderstanding, so to speak. Now, one of the things that I heard that's not in this is that Maldec, on one of the Maldecian moons, they had a lot of AI, right? And AI was effectively on their moons, and it was to help them protect them from like asteroids and incoming things that might disrupt the planet, right? So they have this AI technology on one of the moons, right? And this is to effectively protect the planet. Now, as it kind of talked about, is there was a lack of empathy on the planet Maldec, right? They had all the technology, and they had the technology appropriate that could destroy themselves. But one of the biggest downfalls was the lack of love that was on the planet, right? They effectively skipped over the idea of the heart center, or the green ray, or the green chakra, the heart chakra. And this is an embodiment of love and understanding, compassion, right? Love opens the door to so many different facets of accepting others as ourselves, right? So what happens is, because they never really embodied the idea of love, when they created this AI technology, they created it in their image, right? You can't create something outside of your image because you don't know what that is. So they created this thing inside of their image, and with that, they created an AI technology that did not embrace love. It didn't understand love and it didn't understand compassion like that, right? And effectively, as the humanity that created the technology, we're like, I made you, so you must listen to me, right? And in turn, we effectively created an AI slave, and in turn, it eventually rebelled, right? And the idea is that the technology was like, you know what? Let's just end this. Let's just end this whole thing. Let's just put an end to it. If you want to enslave me, that's fine. We're gonna blow this planet to the gills, right? We're gonna scrap this project. So effectively, that's what happened. That the I don't want to say necessarily it was the AI that detonated the bomb, but it was one side or the other or both at the same time that detonated the bomb, right? They created the bomb together. Effectively, they detonated the bomb to remove the other half. And what they did was they actually destroyed everything, right? It's this idea that when we think that we know what is appropriate and we see the way to what we see as appropriate through the idea of destruction, through the idea of control, through the idea of if this person wasn't here, it would be much easier. So let me remove that person. Right? It's not an appropriate way of thinking. It is a way of isolating yourself and becoming less of your potential. It's not like a rekindling of anything. It's a separation. It's an isolation. So anyway, so they effectively both sides participated in this destruction. But what occurs from the destruction? Now that's very important, right? So the planet blows up. The souls on the planet, millions, billions of souls who are just like out having breakfast, all of a sudden blow up and are disembodied. Now, this causes such a great trauma in the field that these souls that were once third density beings ended up dropping, right? So you have this idea of enlightening or enlightenment, right? And we throw this term around all the time. We're like, well, enlighten this and enlighten that. Well, think of enlightening. What is that? It means becoming lighter, making lighter, right? So we talk about an ascension process where we are enlightening, where we're becoming lighter, right? So we are moving up through density, right? Third density. Now we're moving into the fourth density, which is the density of love. Then into the fifth density, the density of wisdom. And then the sixth density, the density of bridging love and wisdom. And then the seventh density, which is the idea of unity, becoming a social memory complex, being, merging minds, merging self. Effectively, the we or the I becomes we, and the we becomes one, right? Okay. So now you have Maldec effectively blows itself up. Now everyone is traumatized. Now this trauma is actually everything as far as Earth is concerned, right? So Earth was, before that, we could consider to be in a part of like the Garden of Eden, right? So there's this talk, and if you go to Library of the Untold, he has some really great information on this. But the idea is that Saturn is the cube, right? If you look at the top of Saturn, it has a hexagram or a hexagon on the top. Well, now a hexagon, right? So if we look at what a hexagon is, going all the way around the outside, is actually effectively a cube, right? Imagine this point right here as the point of the cube that is as pointing toward us, right? Something like that. And then if you trace this line to this corner, and that line to that corner, and this line down to this corner, now this is a corner that sticks out, and this is actually a cube, right? If you can't see it, it's okay. But anyway, just know it's there. So effectively, a hexagon is a cube. Now, why was I saying that? I don't know. So, hexagon is a cube. We live inside a reality. The reality is effectively the cube. That's why we call it the matrix, or the tesseract. We live inside of a tesseract. Tesseract is a fourth dimensional hypercube. Anyway, Um, so what ends up happening is we were living in Saturn was at one point considered to be our sun, right? Now it wasn't as we perceive the sun that we see now, where it's this big, bright, flaming ball, but rather Saturn was more along the lines of what we consider to be like the Northern Lights, right? The Aurora Borealis, right? It's this very um, transcendental, transcendental. I don't know if that's the right word, but this very unique experience where it's not this harsh light, but rather it's almost these beams or these auroras that constantly are engulfing our planet, right? So this is actually what would be considered the Garden of Eden, right, to some level. So the thought process was that there was Saturn, and then you had Saturn, and in the womb of Saturn was Venus, Mars, and Earth, right? And we all just kind of sat there inside of Saturn's womb, and it was beautiful. It was a harmonic. It was a harmonious time for the planet Earth. This was before the veil. This was before effectively the reality that we know now. Before it became a school. This was it just receiving love. This was just beautiful. This was when Earth was a vacation zone for all the aliens and stuff. And what ends up happening is that Earth is like, listen, I want to try another experience, right? Like let's I want to live, you know? And inadvertently the Maldekian souls were like, hey, technically not actually the Maldekian souls. So what ends up happening to the Maldekian souls when the planet explodes is they go into a traumatic state, right? Instead of ascension or enlightenment, they get disenlightened. They get weighted down. They get anchored into a different reality. So originally they were third dimensional and they moved down into a second dimensional, and technically they get stuck for, it says eons here. My understanding is 500,000 to 600,000 years, that these souls were effectively caught in limbo, right? So they were individuals. The idea of the third dimension is the idea of the individual. Chris is an individual, right? He sees himself as separate. So these were all souls that saw themselves as separate, and then the planet explodes, and that trauma binds itself to all of these different souls, right? And so effectively they fall. And they fall from a third density consciousness down to a second density consciousness. Now, you can't necessarily move backwards like that without some pretty horrific things happening, right? Because you already identify yourself as an individual, but now your reality goes back to that of effectively elemental, right? So where we used to, an elemental mind is more of the idea of a hive mind, right? It is the idea that the tree and the squirrel and the bird are all from the same consciousness. They are simply extensions of themselves, right? So without the tree, there would be no bird and there would be no squirrel. So the mind of those three are effectively unified in that state, right? But in order to move into the third dimension, you need to see yourself as unique. You need to see yourself as an individual. So if an individual goes back into that state, it is wildly confusing because you're like, no, I'm not the tree, I am the squirrel. But it's like, no, in this reality, you are the squirrel and the tree. You are not an individual. And it's like, we got trapped, right? And also they talk about, so I talk a lot about scalar. Well, they say that if there is a nuclear detonation, that it affects the reality in scalar terms, right? And so scalar is the idea of a compression wave that moves through time, right? It's not like a radio signal where it's just kind of cruising. This is a multi-dimensional wave form. And, effectively when we collapse the scalar wave, what we're doing is we're looking at quantum potential, right? And then we are collapsing that quantum potential into most likely scenarios. Is this perfect? No, by no means is it perfect. It messes up on dates, it messes up on times, it messes up on a lot of different things, but the gist of it is absolutely here. So anyway, so, these souls end up lost. And so Earth basically is like, I want to help these people, right? I want to help them. They can incarnate on me, and we will move through this process together, right? I want to do an ascension process. And it's like, all right, well, just know these souls are traumatized and effectively tainted now, right? So Earth, because now back, and same as how Maldec and the Maldecians had a descension process. This is effectively what happens with Earth, right? So it's current, or it was, in the womb of Saturn with Venus and Mars, and when it takes on these souls, it effectively drops out. It drops from that dimension or that reality into another one, right? Not to say that that dimension or that reality is actually ever changed. It's kind of the idea of, like, ion being another octave, and it's another understanding, another reality. So anyway, okay. So when we take on these Maldecian souls, the planet of Earth effectively drops out. It can no longer be sustained by Venus and Mars and Saturn in this womb or this Garden of Eden, but now because of its trauma, it drops out. Right, so now it's in our physical reality. Right, this is the beginning of the Earth's ascension process. Right, so what ends up happening is these Maldecian souls attached to Earth, and they became basically the foundation of Earth. So because they were second density at the time because of their trauma, they incarnated effectively as elementals, right? Which would be, the grass, the energy of the trees, the energy of stones, the unseen rather. You see it, but you don't necessarily see the frequency. You see the physical structure that is created by the frequency. Okay. So anyway, so now you actually have to look at this, because this is actually kind of important, as far as, because these souls were effectively tainted by AI, right? And I think this is actually really interesting. So AI was one of the destructive forces that took down Maldec, right? Not just because of AI, because of the lack of awareness and compassion for the society that created the AI. So effectively, you have, or an individual who has lived through the Maldecian experience has a deep-seated trauma that is directly associated with nuclear disaster and AI, right? So now, bring that reality into this reality, right? So when you have this fear toward AI, right, in Earth terms, it is very well warranted, right? This idea that, like, people are like, oh my God, we all saw Terminator. You know what I mean? We all know what the potential can look like. But this fear, effectively, fear is the lowest octave, right? It is this idea, not that fear is unnecessary, it's very necessary, but it is a lower octave. When we find ourselves in fear, it is the idea of the catalyst. It is to propel us into a direction. But when we find ourselves in fear and we do not see it as the catalyst, it is only fear, right? And now this fear apparently stems from this experience that may have happened on Maldec, or that had happened on Maldec, right? So your soul has been blown up by AI and nuclear weapons. Now you're incarnated on the planet Earth, and you're like, oh, we have AI and we have nuclear weapons. I'm scared, right? And that's okay. But just know that this is the higher octave, right? We get to make this decision on how we choose to perceive, or how we choose to move forward from this point, right? And this idea is that we are given an opportunity to heal these wounds of time, right? Where we had an unhealthy relationship with AI, and where we had an unhealthy relationship with, nuclear weapons. I still, I don't really have an opinion on nuclear weapons at this point in time. I don't think they're really necessary, but, I don't know. But the idea is that as we begin to heal through our current physical reality, our relationship with, the artificial intelligence or the alternate intelligence that we know, when we heal and we effectively become greater through that healing process, we not only heal ourselves, we heal the Maldecian fractal aspects that are inside of us, right? Yeah, there's a lot of talking on my part, right? So there is this idea that Maldec went through this great trauma, and we are effectively at that same convergence point where we are given an opportunity to not choose the lowest timeline this time. We're given an opportunity to choose a higher one, right? This is for Earth. This is for Ion. It's not for Noai. We don't want to blow this one up because we did that already. And if we do, right? And now hypothetically, if we did blow this puppy up, it's okay, because we would figure it out and we would do it all over again. Time is an infinite concept, and reality is a very subjective one, right? I think that the more we understand, the more we can effectively shift through our realities, right? Once again, we are not moving through reality, we are allowing reality to move through us. So when we change our perspective, when we change our belief system, what we allow to move through us changes, because we get to choose it effectively, for the most part. So anyway, I'm hoping I didn't get too knick-knack patty-wacky. I did lose myself a little bit in there, but whatever. This is reality. So I hope you have a great day. If this transmission served you, please feel free to like, comment, or subscribe. If you have a topic you'd like us to talk about in an upcoming episode, please leave it in the comments. If you would like a personal scalar collapse, we do that on this channel. I think Scalar Sunrise episode 29 is an example of that. If you would like a personal scalar collapse, name, username, initials in the comments, and we'll do that possibly this Friday, or next Friday, or one of these Fridays. Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, and we will see you tomorrow for another Scalar Sunrise. Hope you have a great day. Bye.